So today we have, you can already see it, the big bird behind me, but no, he's not from Sesame Street. This is Decidueye. Coming up next. We are back with this Decidueye deck. Now, Decidueye is very similar to Obstagoon from the last format in that it is a counter deck to the format. Let's get into the card. Decidueye with the ability Forest Camouflage, prevent all damage done to this Pokemon by the attacks of your opponent's V and Pokemon GX. Now, this blocks a large number of attackers and archetypes right now, and is again very similar to the Obstagoon of this last format. Obstagoon with its attack that blocked basic Pokemon from attacking it. And now we have Decidueye that just blocks it on an ability, which is really, really a strong thing. It's just an automatic thing. Whereas the Obstagoon needed to attack to work its effect, this Decidueye gets to just exist and have this very strong mechanic. Now, we've seen these abilities perform very well in the past with cards like Suicune and Hoopa. With Hoopa seeing a lot of play even into the expanded format. Even recently, we saw it, do pretty well in these kinds of stall and mill decks in expanded. And so I expect the same thing from Decidueye, for it not to be a tier 1 choice necessarily, but to be more of a counter pick by a lot of players if the format shifts into a very V and GX based format, which it absolutely will. So Decidueye, always something to have on the radar with an ability like this. We have 4 Decidueye, 2 Dartrix, and the only other notable line in the Decidueye line is the Rowlet here. The Rowlet has a Sky Circus ability that says if you played Bird Keeper from your hand during this turn, ignore all energy in the attack costs of this Pokemon. So it has an attack, Wind Pebbles, for 60 damage, does it to one of your bench Pokemon, 3 colorless. But of course, if you play a Bird Keeper, which we do play 3 of, you could do some bench damage there. For Jirachi to facilitate our strategy here, the Stellar Wish is an absolutely amazing ability for a deck like this. And I think that it's just the way you should probably go with this. I mean, we saw the Obstagoon decks play for Jirachi, and so why not just continue the trend? Jirachi is going to find you the piece that you don't have, either the Evolution Incense, the Rare Candy, or a supporter in the early game if you need to get going. We have 1 Zigzagoon. I felt like with the attack of Decidueye, which is a 90 and 20 snipe to 2 of your opponent's bench Pokemon, I felt like that snipe damage could really add up over time and make Zigzagoon a very viable partner. So the Zigzagoon being able to just snipe that 10 extra damage. Let's say you had already used the Decidueye's attack 3 times on an opponent's Jirachi. Well, then you could lay the Zigzagoon down and take your prize doing the 10 damage that you need to KO the Jirachi. I felt like Zigzagoon would be a good inclusion, especially since we play so many Scoop Up Net. I also felt like the last Pokemon that I need to talk about here is the Sableye V. I felt like Sableye V, which with its Crazy Claws attack, was the absolute perfect partner for this deck. Similar to how it was played in the Obstagoon deck, it can take these giant one-hit KOs. So Crazy Claws for 2 Darkness Energy, this attack does 60 more damage for each damage counter on your opponent's active Pokemon. So you can see how with Decidueye's sniping attack and the Zigzagoon to ping little damage counters, you can get up to these very high numbers, start to one-shot Pokemon VMAX that really never intended to be one-shot. I mean, we really are moving into this 2-shot heavy metagame. And so Sableye V kind of twists that on its head, and it gives this deck a little potency in the late game that it otherwise doesn't have. We also have 2 Boss's Orders, 4 Erica's Hospitality, 3 Bird Keeper, 3 Marnie, and 2 Rosa. That rounds out all of our supporters for this deck. The Erica's Hospitality probably could be Professor's Research, but I felt like when building this archetype that I was a little bit nervous about discarding so many cards in the early game, especially when this is so combo reliant, and we don't really have any recovery in this deck, but you could just go up to 4 Research. I think that's a perfectly acceptable way to build this deck. We have 3 Bird Keeper, not necessarily to facilitate Rowlet's attack. It's really not in here for Rowlet, although that's a secondary benefit of playing the Bird Keeper. It's mostly to be able to get your Jirachis going. Since we lose a skateboard, we have to rely only on Scoop Up Net and Switch for our switching effects, but Bird Keeper also can play into that and be kind of an extra switch. Let's say you had a Jirachi active and you wanted to switch into another Jirachi, you could do that with Bird Keeper. Let's say you had a Decidueye active, you wanted to switch into a second Decidueye, you can do that with Bird Keeper as well. Bird Keeper has been popping up in a lot of Japanese lists that I've been seeing, and with the strength of Guzma in past formats, it's pretty easy to see that kind of an auto switch on a card will be very good. We've seen it even like in this last format with something like Tate and Liza. It wasn't seen in a ton of decks, but it did still see play. I feel like with the dearth of good supporters that we have in this upcoming format and are still maintaining our reliance on Jirachi, I feel like Bird Keeper will sneak its way into a few more decks. Now 3, is that the right count? Again, we'll need to test it out, but that is what I've stuck with here for initial testing. 3 Marnie, just to reset your hand, a pretty good early game supporter and that disruption that we otherwise don't have. And then we have 2 Rosa to get us just any combo piece, absolutely the perfect supporter to have right after a knockout. For setup, we have 4 Quick Ball and 4 Capture Energy. Now the Capture Energy otherwise is kind of lackluster, but it does fulfill the second attack cost of the Decidueye, right? So it can fulfill that grass colorless. It can be the colorless requirement for Decidueye's attack. And so I felt like 4 Capture Energy would be perfect in the setup deck like this, where you just want as many Rowlets as possible on the first few turns. You really need to get them up and going before they get sniped by the opponent's attacks. Like if your opponent plays a deck that revolves only around GX and V Pokemon, then you want to make sure that you have 2 Rowlets out on turn 1, so you have the possibility to rare candy into a Decidueye on the following turn. We also have 4 rare candy, pretty self-explanatory since we are running such a thick line of Decidueye. You just want as many rare candies. The nice thing about the Decidueye, and maybe in the future you could cut back on either the number of Decidueye, maybe go down to 3, or potentially the number of rare candy go down to 3, is that it's just an automatic effect. So it's so hard of a lock that like you either get it up and you win against certain decks, or you don't get it up and you don't win against certain decks, or just you get it up and your opponent has an answer to that. So there is just all this kind of, you know, interplay there that you might not need the 4 lines there. We have 4 Scoop Up Net, 3 Switch. Those are just our switching options for our Jirachi. We also play 2 Evolution Incense and 2 Lily's Pokédoll. So the Evolution Incense is going to grab out our Decidueyes and Dartrixes. And the Lily's Pokédoll was something that we saw in the Obstagoon decks to kind of get around this early game setup where you don't really have anything and you just need to buy yourself like 1 extra turn. Like let's say you had your first turn Rowlet knocked out and you needed a turn to just get out a couple more Rowlets. Well, you could shove up a Pokédoll and have that take the hit and go from there. We play 4 Aurora. Those are the only way we have to attack with the Sableye V. Now that's going to be a little bit sketchy for sure. I mean, it is what it is. I felt like we didn't want to include Dark Energy because at least the Aurora can also work on Decidueye. But the Aurora is what we have. The 4 Capture Energy, as alluded to earlier, and our 3 Grass Energy. Just to round out, I felt like a first turn attachment would be really big, and to play 11 Energy, you should be able to get that. So that is the list, you guys. Let me know what you think about this list, whether or not you think that this card could see play, and how big of an impact it'll have on the metagame. Feel like it's going to be nerfed inherently by the rise of fire Pokemon. I mean, we look at Charizard to a lesser extent, but Salamence and the Centiskorch VMAXs. Now, those should probably play Volcanion. And that's like an inherent soft counter to the Decidueye in that it's not going to play those cards just to beat Decidueye, but it does play that Volcanion from Unbroken Bonds. Going to be able to one-shot Decidueye if they have 4 fire energy in play. So with that, I don't really think that Decidueye has enough in the tank, but I think it is a card to keep on the radar in case decks move towards it should have a really good ADPZ matchup. And so those would be kind of the decks that I would look to determine whether or not Decidueye would be a good play in the post-rotation meta. So that is the list, you guys. I hope you've enjoyed it. Please remember to follow me at twitch.tv/FlexDaddyRighteous. I do a podcast every Wednesday. I stream Monday, Wednesday, Friday, and I make all this content once a day for you guys. So I hope you enjoyed this deck list. I will catch you on the next video. And remember, good luck and also have fun.